Hey, all, Josh here, and welcome to the first part of my Rocky-thon. I figured since the Rambo-thon was such a success and I enjoyed doing it so much that I want to try another one of these marathons. Although it is a little touch and go to try and find a series that I actually do want to do it on, and believe me, I have taken into account your suggestions. Terminator is definitely something I do want to do. I actually have kind of just been interested in the Rocky series for quite a while now, and like Rambo, I haven't really seen many of them. I've only ever seen the first one prior, so much like that series, I am going to be going into this basically without any knowledge of the plot outside of general pop culture knowledge. So I think it's going to be enjoyable. I'm going to go through all 6 films, and this video is going to start off with the original. Getting to it, as if I really need to summarize the story of Rocky, basically, an out-of-luck Philadelphia prize fighter, and as well, collector, I should say, is initially wins this one huge chance to take on the world heavyweight champion, who is Apollo Creed in this movie. And the whole movie is kind of both about this boxing match as well as his budding love for the pet shop owner that he's kind of infatuated with, Adrian. Now, I really enjoy the plot of this movie and wasn't at all what I expected. Granted, again, I have seen this before, but not for a long time. And just from general knowledge, I would assume that the majority of the movie was just a training sequence, because that's the most popular part of it, I suppose. But actually, that didn't really come into play until the last act. The last quarter of the movie was about that. But even then, that wasn't really the point, especially the ending particularly surprised me. This is a slower paced movie than you think, and a lot of it is just about taking in the minutiae of Rocky's everyday life. And it is kind of not a very great life. It's not a bad life per se, but he's not very rich. He doesn't really have a great house. He doesn't really have many friends, and the one he does have is rather repulsive. And I guess the best way to describe it is I saw one review that describes the movie as a pugnacious, charming, grimy, beautiful fairy tale from the New York Magazine 1976, and really that is the best thing I can say about that movie. It's the perfect way to describe it, because it really is kind of this really down-to-earth, grimy success story. And I really enjoyed that. Don't get me wrong, the success story is incredibly rousing, but moreover, just kind of the day-to-day things that you see a lot of. Rocky is a fascinating and incredibly well-drawn character. You really don't see a lot of protagonists with this much depth. Sylvester Stallone owes a lot of credit to this, more so than the director, I think, but the director certainly did a fantastic job of focusing in the story and keeping the camera really in Rocky's space. And you really get to know this character. You feel like you can relate to him, even if your life, I hope at least, is not much like his. And he really is just a basic, an average guy. Outside of his really large physique, this is Sylvester Stallone we're talking about, he's really kind of clumsy relationally. He doesn't really know how to relate to people. He's got this kind of speech impediment that works against him, and it actually is brought up in the series a couple times. I've seen the second movie now as well, so little lead in to get that, I guess, but he just seems like a guy that might actually exist. He's quite a realistic character, and he's got a lot of foibles to him. He's not perfect, but yet he's really charming, and that's really what I really have to give this movie credit for. You spend so much time with Rocky that you can't help but love the guy, and because of that, you can't help but cheer him on when his time really does come. It's like I said, this movie is known for its inspiring story, but perhaps not in the way you might think it would be. It's not just a man overcoming an obstacle, it's a man overcoming really life. And I really appreciated that. And none of this could have been brought about without the characters. And Rocky, chief among them, I've already greatly discussed, but there's also a lot of really other great characters in this. Carl Weathers is Apollo Creed. Hilarious villain, one of those villains you love to hate. Does a really fantastic job. He doesn't get a huge amount of screen time, and he's more effective in the sequel because he gets more screen time, but for this he serves his job perfectly nicely. He's really great, really plays the part well. I don't know what more to say. The actor who plays Mickey, the name is escaping me at the moment, Meredith Burgess, that's it, and, or Burgess Meredith, I apologize. He is kind of parodied at this point into oblivion, but his actual performance is quite effective, and his monologue near the mid-portion of the film is incredibly heartfelt. You really can't help but feel for the guy as well, and he really makes a great counterpoint to Rocky, I think, as his trainer. He is kind of the typical trainer, but he has his own character outside of that, which is more than I can say for some other lesser movies, perhaps. And 2 other characters, the main characters, there's really not a whole lot of characters in this film. is the actor who plays Adrian, who I gotta say, I actually was kind of disappointed in. While I like the idea of Adrian being kind of the foil to Rocky and fitting the pieces that he needs, as he says, he's filling gaps. But I really like that idea of it. Her acting leaves a little something to be desired, and because of it, I think a few of Rocky's romantic advances kind of seem unwanted at times, and I realize that she's chronically shy, and she does that well for the most part. But during romantic scenes, I think she could have turned it up just a little to make it seem a little less creepy. And that's the only real fault I can come across. The other one that is not necessarily a fault of the film, but just what I feel, is that the actor who plays Paulie, Rocky's best friend, is an incredibly despicable person and absolutely repulsive in almost every scene he's in. His mannerisms, he's just rude, and there's really not a whole reason to feel good to like him in any way. Even when the film tries to redeem him later on, it wasn't really there for me. Particularly his actions, just frankly almost unforgivable. He doesn't really try to redeem himself at any point. It's more just a breakdown. Anyway, I'm saying too much, but suffice to say, while he is a great actor and he does his job very well in this, he it, it made the film a little difficult to watch at times. But that is part, I must say, of kind of the grimy nature of the story. Outside of the fact that the chances of something like this happening are 1 in a million, this is actually quite a realistic movie. A lot of this could theoretically happen. A lot of these people seem like they could exist. And because of that, it really lends the movie a sense of down to earth nature, despite the fairy tale like quality of, a nobody becoming the biggest somebody in the country. And overall, though, like I said, story and characters really meshed together well. They really created some classic things here, I gotta say. The effects in this movie was made in the 70s, so obviously you're not going to expect a massive amount of detail here and there. But there is some really nice cinematography, like I said. Particularly, a lot of the movie gets us right in Rocky's like headspace, personal space. Really gets to know him. That was a great choice. In particular, during the earlier training sequences, you really feel that Rocky is 1 in a million with large landscape shots, and Rocky just a small figure deep into the frame. And that was very effective overall. And lastly, how could I not mention Bill Conti's soundtrack and the music for this movie? Because really, it is iconic. You almost want to watch the movie just to hear that music. If you want to train, it is the quintessential training music. Just put it on your iPod and go work out. It's Time to Fly for the training sequence, absolutely fantastic. But I think a lot of the other music deserves note too. Bill Conti did a great job during a lot of the more quiet scenes. His romantic theme is particularly effective, I think. It's very evocative music, if nothing else. It's dated, don't get me wrong, but it definitely does its job. Overall, the original Rocky is not the best movie. I think that while it is a slower paced movie, it could have used a couple different tweakings, such as making Paulie a slightly more likable character, and the actor who plays Adrian's maybe acting just a little more emotive. But other than that, these really are small quibbles. This is a fantastic movie, and by the end of it, you feel great. You feel like you've experienced a full story, which is always something I love in a movie, and definitely required to consider something a great movie. And lastly, you know what? Just go see Rocky. I really hope the sequels do hold up. This isn't my favorite movie, I don't think, but for the type of movie it is, it really gets the job done. It's certainly easily rewatchable. I had to rewatch this a couple times to give it a fair shake, I think. And I think you should do the same. Give it a fair shake, that is.